think we can, because I think we are already late by 6 minutes, if that works for you.
Sure, ma'am.
Yeah, perfect. So a more informal kind of discussion, and one of the most important topics I think which National Legal Rights Consortium has chosen is environmental rights and constitutional law. So I think this is one of the most pressing issues of today's times that we are in. And also additionally, I think this is very relevant to all of us in some way or the other. We had the recent judgment of the Supreme Court few days before, where it talked about the Great Indian Bustard. So the Great Indian Bustard is an endangered bird, and there was supposed to be a laying down of cables that was supposed to be done in the area of Rajasthan to MP, and also stretching to other places. So because of which this particular bird was under danger, and finally we got the very recent judgment of Supreme Court, where it said that right against climate action must also be recognized as a fundamental right under Article 21. Now this brings us to one of the most important discussions, and the discussion is from how and from where do we locate environmental jurisprudence. So a lot of people say that in India, very specifically, environmental jurisprudence is somewhat we located to 1972. So they say that before 1972, India as such did not have any environmental jurisprudence of its own, though it's a wrong connotation because of the reason that due to our religious scriptures, our culture, whatever you say it, environmental protection was always a part of it. So we are not, we won't say or we won't locate the evolution of environmental jurisprudence from 1972. But much of the literature that has been written by the Western scholars, they believe in the idea that 1972 is a very important time in the history. Now, 1972 is very important in the time of history of environmental jurisprudence for a lot of reasons. It's also very close to the hearts of Indians per se. Reason being, the then Prime Minister, Mrs. Indira Gandhi, she represented India. She went to Stockholm, and 1972 is the year when we have the Stockholm Conference. And before that, sadly, if we look at the Indian Constitution, you'll see that, the word environment is missing from the Constitution first. Second thing is that, as such, there were no laws in India which address environmental issues. So this was the biggest lacuna that was there before 1972. We had isolated laws which were more or less passed by the Britishers. And they had something to do with mining. They had something to do with water, etc., etc. We had one provision in the IPC, I think if I'm not wrong, section 299, something like that, which talked about that if you block the public water canal, you shall be punished. Free flow of water should be there. And that too also happened because at that point in time, we were fighting, and we still are fighting, the idea of untouchability. Yeah, 268. Thank you so much for the correction. So 268 basically is the article which talks about, not blocking water canals, water pathways, and letting the water flow freely. So we only had IPC, we only had few laws that were there. Not all the laws, as such address the issue of environmental jurisprudence or environmental protection by and large. Then comes 1972 and Mrs. Indira Gandhi into picture. Now, what she does is she travels all the way to Stockholm, represents India, and she says, okay, I agree with you that environmental issues or environmental pollution is a big problem, and we need to do something about it. But India is facing another very big problem, bigger than environmental degradation. So everyone asked, what is that problem? So she said, that problem is poverty. We are facing a biggest problem in India, and that is poverty. It is bigger than environmental degradation. Now, what happened is, because of this, the whole, whatever discussion that was happening, it took a very interesting turn. People said, yes, environmental protection is okay, but there is a clear divide between developing nation and developed nation. Clear divide. And that clear divide, we still see it. We see that divide even today. The global south, the global north divide, and I think we can never break this division of global north and global south until more voices from global south come forward. When I'm talking about global south and global north, I mean to say, when you look at the world map, majorly you will find the developed nations majorly belong to the global north region, and developing nations belong majorly to the global south region. And interestingly, one more fun fact is, all the global south region, be it Africa, be it India, be it all the global south nations, sometime or the other, they were colonized by Britishers. So usually global south, more or less, we were the colonized countries. We are the developing nations, generally speaking. Global now north belongs to usually those portions of the those countries which are very powerful, they are developed, they are highly industrialized, and they're actually the most contributor to pollutants. Now when Indira Gandhi brings us forward that poverty is a bigger problem than environmental protection, they say yes. The lady says something and it makes some sense. Yes, it does make some sense. And that point in time, everyone agrees with her and they form the action plan and map for ahead. Then Indira Gandhi comes back to India and she says, yeah, this is absolutely fine that, we went to Stockholm, we represented India, but India does not have any laws. We do not even have the word environment per se in the constitution. So now this brings us to one very interesting question. The interesting question is, okay, if in fundamental rights we don't have the word environment, what about DPSP? What about fundamental duties? What about, any other provision per se? Then when we look at all these things, we see that, there are certain provisions which talked about the duties of citizens. For example, as basic as maintaining scientific temperament. It's a duty of a citizen to maintain scientific temperament. You cannot spread any fake news, or you cannot believe on unscientific, unrational information. And this is very much established in the recent judgment of Patanjali. I don't know whether you people are following the news. So the advertisements that were published by Patanjali that our medicine is the only medicine which can cure COVID, and all promising words, false promises that were there, was very much before the Supreme Court recently. And Supreme Court was very angry with the state of Uttarakhand. Even it asked Baba Ramdev to come forward to the court and apologize to the people. Because I don't know whether you people are aware, Article 19(1), freedom of speech and expression, does give you the right to advertise. The right to advertisement is a part and parcel of the fundamental right to speech and expression. But at the same time, you would have read cases in constitutional law like Hamdard Davakhana case. You might have read cases which deals with not publishing wrongful information through advertisement and misleading advertisement. So recently you might have seen in the Patanjali judgment, it's a classic case, interesting case, and sad part is during the COVID, we saw how people advertise, if you eat this particular papad, if you drink this, if you eat this, your health and everything will be cured. But sadly, we see it had no scientific backing. The biggest issue is, yes, we are supposed to maintain a scientific temperament, but at what cost? That's another issue that is there. So Mrs. Gandhi comes back and then she says, we do not have any law and we need to do something. Okay. Then finally, what happens? Slowly after 1972, 1974, 1976, 1981, Water Act, Air Act, etc., Environmental Protection Act 1986, they start coming up due to the act of the parliament, and the parliament takes very keen interest that we need to do something. Also, parallelly, one very sad event happened in the history. That is the Bhopal gas tragedy, which actually shook many governments of that time that, we need to understand things beyond our understanding, beyond our capability. And Bhopal gas tragedy case is also a very interesting case for all those people who believe in the idea of international law and how powerful Article 253 is. So Article 253 of the Indian Constitution says that if India is signing any treaty, agreement, or anything at international level, it needs to do some homework. What is the homework? When you come back to India, you will respect the treaty, you will respect the agreement, and you will also try to frame municipal laws, that is national laws, in tune with the international agreements. That is 253, simple reading in Indian Constitution. So though the word environment is not there directly, but if you read 253, if you read various other provision, you'll find that some sense of protection, some sense of, check and balance is there in the Indian Constitution, even though the word environment is directly not there. Now, what happens is There's a very classic example of a very famous writer, Ramchandra Guha. So if you people get time, please try to read the books written by him. If you're not able to read it, it would be very good if you could watch his lectures. So Ramchandra Guha is a very good historian. He says India has faced three waves of environmentalism. Number one was a time when we did not have any laws, when we were silent, when we were ruled by Britishers, and the Britishers came, whatever they understood, they made the law. And that is with the major laws that India has. India's major laws are framed by Britishers, especially Indian Penal Code, etc., which the present government took effort and tried to decolonize that law. But decolonization versus renaming of the laws are different issue. I'm not going into that debate. It's a political debate, but I'm saying at least it attempted to make a step to decolonize laws, because major laws in India are more or less drafted by the Britishers. Now, what happens is, majorly the first wave of environmentalism, we saw no whatsoever, laws are there, but we had something, that is the religious scriptures, be it the Quran, be it the Bhagavad Gita, be it the Vedas, be it the Bible. You read it, every religious book minimum talks about the protection of environment. It talks about the laws of war. So for example, under public international law, when you read Bible, the idea of law of war, the idea of just war, the idea of jus in bellum, the idea of jus in bello, because we are seeing a lot of wars happening in Israel and Palestine, Ukraine and Russia. So this has 2023-24 has become the year of maximum number of conflict. We use the word conflict because it is soft, but rather if you see it in the larger sense, it is nothing but a very controlled war. I say it because of the simple reason that there is human loss, whatever it is there, but it is regionally very specific area that is there. So Bible talks about laws of war. It talks about in bellum. It talks about just in bello. If you look at the Vedas, if you look at the Quran, it also talks about a lot of provision, talks very explicitly about environmental protection. Now, very interestingly, India had these scriptures much before the Western scholars came and wrote about it. But the first wave of environmentalism, as per Ramchandra Guha, is a phase where we had this, but the Britishers come, formulate a law which they understood that it made sense. But sadly, now if you look, the highest number of deforestation that took place was during the time of Britishers. In the first wave of environmentalism, you see the maximum amount of environmental degradation and pollution took place during the time of Britishers. None of the rulers, be it the Mughal rulers, be it the Chola Empire, any empire you take, none of the rulers were so ruthless, or they were rather to say they were so uninterested in environmental protection that they did not take care of India's environmental policies or laws or whatsoever. And if you look at the statistics, very explicitly they will say maximum deforestation that took place in India was during the time of the Britishers, and even without afforestation, because as per Indian idea, it is when you cut a tree, you have to replace it with a tree. That we have a specific law in India called as CAMPA, compulsory afforestation, right? It's a separate act. Right, but we saw that during the Britishers, maximum, environmental degradation took place. This is first wave of environmentalism. Second wave of environmentalism happens when we saw Chipko movement take place. We saw women coming in front. We saw people, being conscious, civil society, saying that, okay, we are in the era of LPG. That is, we are in the era of liberalization, privatization, globalization, post 1975, etc. But just because you're industrializing, that doesn't mean you will compromise with the environmental standards whatsoever. And to make sure, what they did was they said that we need to come forward, the civil society needs to come forward and do something about it. We have the biggest example of Narmada Bachao Andolan. We have the biggest example of Chipko movement. There are so many movements, and very interestingly, in all these movements you will see the participation of two most important communities. One is, of course, the women taking the lead, gendered approach, and the second is the indigenous community. So the indigenous community played a very important role when it talked about, environmental protection. And recently what is happening is, what we are seeing now is a continuous fight between indigenous community with the government and their policies, whatever is happening. So that was the second wave of environmentalism we saw. Now we come to the third wave of environmentalism. Third wave of environmentalism, what happens is post 1990s era. That is when 2000s, etc. comes forward, and we saw that there is a clear-cut debate between third generation rights. Now, before I tell you what is a clear-cut debate between third generation right, let me very quickly tell you, we have something called as Bill of Rights. Now, under international, what is Bill of Rights? Three things are called Bill of Rights. Number one, UDHR, United Nations Declaration on Human Rights. Second, ICSR. Okay. Then the last one is ICCPR. All of these three things together form a capsule called Bill of Rights. You all know this, right? Now, what happens is, apart from the Bill of Rights, one thing very interesting is we have tried to formulate different, laws, and we have different, legal systems in the world, civil law, common law, different, everyone follows their own ideas, whatever it is there, different idea of adjudication, different forms of government, whatever is there. But in this third wave of, environmentalism, very interestingly, we saw that there was a conflict between third generation right and environment per se. Now, first generation right, what does it mean? First generation right means usually political and civil rights. For example, let's say right to vote. For example, let's say right to shelter, food, etc. All these basic rights that are there are first generation right. Second generation rights are forming union, asking for better payment, maternity leave, etc. These would be called as, second generation right? And even for that matter, right to choose a partner, right to have a healthy, family, whatever it is, this is second generation right. Third generation rights are very interesting, set of rights. Third generation right include right to development, right to self-determination. So, for example, what Palestine is doing, it is self-determining its autonomy, that yes, I was always there. So, right to self-determination, right to development, all these rights are third generation rights. We see 1960s, up till 1960s, we were advocating for first generation right, because as basic as right to vote was not there. Women did not have the right to vote. Then after 1960s, you will see 70s, 80s era, where we are advocating for, because we have industrialization, union, equal pay, gender rights, surrogacy, pregnancy, minimum wage. So all these are second generation rights usually you will see. Economic rights basically, right? Social rights. Third generation right is something new, something beyond economical, social, political and civil rights. And that very much includes right to development. So in 2000s in India, what we saw, direct conflict between third generation right and right to environment. Okay. Now what happens is, a lot of people say that, right to development versus right to environment is a very interesting debate, ma'am, and a lot of people have written about it. And it's very difficult to, form a balance in it. So the Constitution came up with a very interesting theory. And that very interesting theory people might have heard is the harmonious construction theory. So it says whenever there are two conflicting fundamental rights or two conflicting rights for that matter, you cannot give preference to one right. Of course, you can't do that. As a judge, I can't do that, right? What do I do? Let's say there is a fight between Article 21, right to sleep properly, right to life. And at the same time, Article 25, right to religious practices with loudspeakers, maybe azan, maybe jagrata, whatever it is. Because both are important if you see. Right to both are fundamental rights. Right to religion is a fundamental right. At the same time, Article 21, right to life is also a fundamental right. Now the judge is thinking, what should I do? 21 versus 25, how do I decide? So the judge says, let's take out one theory, and the theory is harmonious construction theory. As per harmonious construction theory, it says, let us find a harmonious way to solve this dispute. That is, let us find a middle path. Okay, what was the middle path? The middle path is, okay, yes, you have right to religion. Yes, you have the right to 3 P's in religion. Practice, propagate, and profess your religion. But at the same time, other people also have right to life. What if someone is pregnant? What if someone is old age? What if someone is lunatic? What if someone is, does not want to hear your noise? Then what do I do? So it says, okay, you can play loudspeaker, whatever you are doing. Take permission of the local magistrate that is there. Number one. Second, first rider. Second, they say beyond 10 p.m. you can't play this loud music whatsoever. 10 p.m. we have to stop. And before 6 p.m. you can't play. Some sort of a middle path they try to evolve. And that is how noise pollution rules also came into picture. So very progressive rules, noise pollution rules, but how much do we follow today? That's a different question, because I see what you say, misuse of these provisions, and people are, making noise as and when that is required. That's a different story. But noise pollution rules were formulated because of this. Now, when we have contesting right to environment versus development, because development is also fundamental right, and at the same time, right to environment is also fundamental right. Both of them are not explicitly mentioned in the constitution, but due to interpretation, liberal interpretation, if we see article 21 etc., all of these talks about these two very important concepts, and we see direct fight between these two. Now when we see direct fight between these two, one very interesting thing comes into picture, that is our Indian policy is, or our Indian laws say that we have three lists: union list, state list, concurrent list. Of course, whenever there's a conflict between union and state, and if the matter is in concurrent, union prevails. We all know this, no need to revise. But the biggest problem is, whenever we are making a law, we need to see under which list it is placed. So for example, let's take water. Water is a very interesting topic. So any idea where is water placed? Is it under concurrent? Is it under state? Is it under union? Any idea? Anyone? You can write in the chat box. Any idea? Yes, Nandini. Yes, ma'am. Please tell me.
Ma'am, I think concurrent list is because
water is under concurrent. Anyone else?
It is in state list.
Ma'am, I think it is in state.
State
list. But I believe.
Anyone else? Now, if I'll ask you this. Yeah.
Central list, ma'am.
Central list. Okay. Okay. Anyone else? Concurrent. Okay.
State list, madam.
State list.
State list. Yes, ma'am. State list.
State list. Okay. Very interesting. I saw someone saying about center also. So anyways, very interestingly, water is under state list. And that is why there's a maximum fight. It's neither in concurrent list nor under central list. Water is under state list. Now, water is under state list, and that is why we have the Kaveri issue. Karnataka fighting with Tamil Nadu. Of course, that's why it is there. And that is why we had to make a separate river board altogether to solve the Kaveri issue. And that is why the Supreme Court had to use its special power to deal with such issues. Yes, absolutely right, sir. It's in the state list. So whenever we are making law, we need to see under which list it is there. It's a very interesting thing. And the basic problem that I face when I teach my students is they never look at these lists. And it's very important to look at both state, central, and concurrent lists to understand what kind of a law is being made, especially when concurrent list is there. So especially during the farm bills, I don't know whether you people, a lot of you were following the farm protests, etc. You might see that the government came up with a very interesting set of 3 farm related acts that were there. I don't know whether you people are aware or not. A lot of people wrote about that the center is trying to interfere into the working of state. A lot of people said center is interfering in the working of state by making laws on something which is a part and parcel of the state list. Though the word, very interestingly, you will see agriculture is not there in the state list, but agricultural process, etc., allied words are there in the state list. So this argument is 50-50 okay, but not perfectly fine. That yes, the center is trying to interfere with the working of the state. Federalism is actually because the word agricultural process is there. Explicitly, the word agriculture is not there. But interestingly, if you see, it was a very interesting move. But again, a political discussion, we are not going there. I'm omitting the political part. But what I'm trying to say here or highlight is whatever the matter is there, under which list it forms, under which list it falls, and what kind of a law is being made is a very interesting story altogether for any constitutional law student to understand that whether the law that has come up is actually addressing the issue or not, and whether the center-state relationship is also being withheld properly. Because I don't know whether you people know or not, federalism is also a part of the basic structure doctrine. Even federalism you can't disturb. Federalism means power sharing between state and center. So this is there. So we saw that, there were a lot of conflict during the 2000s that we saw. Direct debate between right to development and right to environment was there. Direct debate were there, issues were there. And Ramchandra Guha calls this as the third wave of environmentalism. He says this third wave of environmentalism, maximum litigation took place. Maximum judicial activism took place. And he even said it is because of this judicial activism we have something called as NGT being set up, National Green Tribunal, right? All of you might be aware. Now, National Green Tribunal, it's a statutory body. Again, under the Indian Constitution, if you look at, we have constitutional bodies, we have statutory bodies. Constitutional bodies are those bodies which are mentioned under the Constitution, right? Now, if you look at the constitutional bodies, Finance Commission is a constitutional body, right? You might be aware. And you can give many examples. Many bodies are there which are mentioned as constitutional bodies. They have specific articles in the Indian Constitution devoted, and they're constitutional bodies. But tribunal per se, 243 talks about tribunal, but NGT per se was formulated because of NGT Act of 2010, right? So it's a statutory body. Now, what happens is NGT comes into picture and people say that, pendency of the case will be, taken care of. Don't worry, specialized environmental issues will be taken care of. But sadly, if you see, it's only NGT only has jurisdiction over 8 to 9 laws. That's it. Not more than that. Majorly, Wildlife Act is not under the purview of NGT if you look at. There are various very interesting Forest Dwellers Act, if I'm not wrong, is not a part of the NGT Act. NGT does not have a jurisdiction over it. It has a very limited jurisdiction, right? So that is another very big problem with the NGT. And finally, now, if you look at the structure, we have the Supreme Court, we have the, the NGT that is there, we have the High Courts that is there, so on and so forth. Now the problem is, yes, Vimla, yes, ma'am. Yes, ma'am, please tell me. Someone has raised a hand, ma'am, please. You can unmute and ask. Okay, ma'am, if you have anything to say at any point in time, you can unmute and speak. I can always answer. That's not an issue. Now, what happens is interesting point of debate here. The debate is, we all know Article 32 is the heart of the Indian Constitution. But 226 is very big in its scope. You all know about it. You might have read in your constitutional law classes. We have Article 32 for writ petitions. We have Article 226 for writ petitions. High Court, Supreme Court. But they often say that 226 is greater in its ambit than 32 because large number of petitions can be entertained in 226 and 332 is very specific in its nature. Scope of 226 is broader than 32. This is usually the comment if you read in D.D. Basu, etc. All these very good important writers like Sirvai, Hidayatullah and D.D. Basu, they've commented and written about it. Now what happens is, many times you will see a particular case is running in NGT and there's also a particular case running in under 226 in the High Court. Now the question comes before you, and this is your homework. You have to find out whether High Court is above the NGT or the NGT is above the High Court, or they are equivalent to each other. Now, as per the NGT Act, it says any matter of environmental importance shall be entertained by the NGT. So if let's say today someone is cutting the tree, environmental importance comes within the list of 9 acts, it goes to the NGT. But many times you will see, let's say construction of a particular, statue near Gujarat. There was a threat to the dolphins that were there near the Run of Kutch area where the biggest statue of India was being situated. Being constructed, or let's say any project that is coming up, you'll see many petitions even in the High Court being entertained and being parallelly running. Now the question is, does this matrix of 226 writ petition interferes with the working of the tribunal? Yes or no? It's a very interesting question, very important legal question that you must look into. Someone answered that, ma'am, yes. Oh, sorry, Ghadial, not the dolphin. Dolphin is in Yamuna. Yes, the alligators that were there. Yes, absolutely right. So if you look at the jurisdictional problem, even NGT has a lot of jurisdictional problem. A lot of cases do not fall within the ambit of NGT, and it's a big issue that is there. Now, when we look at all of these issues, one of the most interesting concept that now I will talk about, this is the background that I wanted to highlight. Now, the topic of our interest that we're going to talk about is, what are the new developments that are happening in Indian Constitution and environment which we should look out for and which will shape the future of Indian environmental jurisprudence. So one of the most interesting and important development that is taking place is regarding rights of nature. Now, rights of nature is a very interesting concept that is coming up. So let's say dolphin in the Yamuna, let's say the Ghadials in the Kutch, let's say the Great Indian Bustard in MP, let's say the very famous lion of a particular place, let's say river Yamuna itself or river Ganga itself. River Ganga is considered as very holy and precious to Hindu religion because you perform your last rites of the person. Apart from that, we revere river Ganga as a goddess also, right? That's the power and the value of river Ganga that is there. So all these, nature oriented things that are there, they cannot speak, they cannot say anything. But the problem is we are exploiting them to levels that we can't even imagine. Now a new wave of litigation has started worldwide, and in India we have a very interesting case filed in Uttarakhand. And that case in Uttarakhand, it talked about the first case which said that give the river certain rights. What are these certain rights? Give river legal personality. Now we all know what is legal personality. Legal personality is, let's say, a corporation, Maruti Suzuki. We say Maruti Suzuki company has a legal personality. Then what does it mean? If a company has a legal personality, it means it can sue or be sued, right? Straight meaning. If I say that, a particular unborn child has a legal personality, can sue and can be sued in the court of law. First thing that comes to our mind. So legal personality, the first thing that comes to your mind is, if I give anything a legal personality, or I say that this particular thing has a legal personality, we will say what? It has the right to sue and to be sued in the court of law. Now what has happened is NGT was an outcome of the first green court which was established in New Zealand. So New Zealand became the pioneer of establishing the first green court, and it inspired many countries, including India also. And India and Bangladesh parallelly also came up with a green court. We call it the tribunal. We call it the National Green Tribunal. Parallelly, what happened is, I'm coming to that. Amit, just give me a moment. So parallelly, what happened is the right of nature movement also started. So we had the indigenous community called the court, which was established in Maori community, that is community that is there. So Maori community is very strong in New Zealand and Australia, specifically New Zealand. They said that it's high time we worship the nature and we see nature as a god and goddesses. And at the same time, Salim versus State of Uttarakhand, you're absolutely right. Now what happens is, they say since we worship the nature and the state is exploiting the nature, whatever it is, we need to give some rights to them. Now what are these bundle of rights? We will award them legal personality. Okay. What is a legal personality? They say that, consider river Wangui. That was the first river in the world in New Zealand. In Australia, I'm sorry. That was given the right to sue and to be sued. So we give legal personality to the river. Now, what happens is there? That means that tomorrow someone is polluting and you want to bring or hold a person liable, the river will act on its own. The river can be a party in the petition that can be filed before the court of law. Now, very interestingly, if you see, this has created a wave all over the world. Everyone now, very recently, if you see, Philippines also talked about giving right to whales, for that matter. Whales should be given, the right to personality. Ecuador, absolutely. There are many examples that we have worldwide. Brazil, many champion legal personality to Mother Nature. Some started giving to mountains, some started giving to rivers, to animals, etc., etc. And this is also shaped in animal rights jurisprudence also. Now, when it came to India, very interestingly, the first case under the High Court, that is the Uttarakhand High Court, came as far as the legal personality of the river Ganga is considered, was argued before the court of law. And when it was argued before the court of law, of course, that matter was rebutted, and now it's in Supreme Court and it is still pending. Supreme Court is yet to decide it. But at the High Court level, what they said is, yes, we understand that there's a lot of pollution, and yes, you need to give legal personality to the river whatsoever it is there. From where did they draw the analogy? They drew the analogy from the jurisprudence. And secondly, they said when we can say idols or god and goddesses, the murtis that are there, when we can give legal personality to them, we should also give legal personality to the nature, to Mother Ganga, because we revere Ganga as a goddess, and it holds very important prominence in all of our lives. Now, when this came up, a lot of confusion, a lot of issues also started. Now, what is the confusion and the issues that is globally also there? The biggest problem is when you guarantee someone is a legal personality. And let's say we all know for a matter of fact, who is the natural guardian of resources in India? The state. If I ask you in one line, natural resources, who is the guardian of natural resources? It is a state. Sometimes all these industries, etc., whenever they seek permission to operate, they take environmental clearances from CPCB, Central Pollution Control Board, if it is a central industry. If it is a state bound or a local level industry, it will take it from the SPCB, that is State Pollution Control Board. And even NGT comes into picture. Sometimes the state is not only the guardian of natural resources, but it is also the violator of these environmental protection. When it gives permission to such industries, etc., it is also allowing pollution to take place within the ambit of those river areas, whichever it is there, right? At the same time. So it is a protector also, but at times it also acts as a perpetrator of environmental degradation. Now, this is a very interesting issue. Now, when you give legal personality, 2-3 questions come into picture. Number one, who will be the legal guardian, right? If you're filing a case in the court of law, we all know legal personality issue comes up with many other issues. Number one, who will be the legal guardian? Number two, let's take example, it is a river. River we know can change its course at any point in time. Today, let's say it is raining 100 cubic centimeter, whatever it is. Let's say someday it rains very much and the volume of the river is so high, it changes its course and it destructs a whole village. Now, since it's a legal personality, people fight a case against river. Oh, the river took away my house. Now, what should I do? Since it has legal personality, you can of course question the river in the court of law. Yes or no? As per the legal personality rule. This is also a big issue. Number one, who will be the guardian? Number two, who will actually fight the case on cases in places where act of God, or let's say when river swells, or when let's say when there are natural disasters, then what happens? So for example, let's say we give lion the rights of nature. Yes, lion should be protected, it's endangered, or tiger for that matter, right? Now tomorrow, let's say the tiger enters into a civil colony, kills any person for that matter. Again, there's a debate here. As per the rights of nature, yes, we've given rights of nature to the tiger, whatsoever it is there, but how viable it is when it enters human community that is there. So rights of nature is a very interesting, very progressive movement to protect the nature that is there. It is a very progressive, forefronted environmental jurisprudence area where you're talking about guaranteeing of the rights of the nature, of the animals, and per se animal, birds, flora, fauna, everything that is there. But it has its own very interesting set of challenges. Now, interesting set of challenges I'm saying because currently what we are seeing is, until 2-3 years back, there was no talk about the idea of climate change. Now recently we've started seeing everything and anything we are discussing about climate change, though I would say it is a little late, but again, it's a welcome step that we're talking about it. And if you look at it, we have hundreds of litigation happening currently over the world where you have climate change suits that are being filed. Now, these are very interesting climate change suits that are there. And very interestingly, India, we have a lot of cases against big MNCs that are there, which have talked about climate change action. But sadly, we do not have a climate change law as of today. Though there are policies, though there is a commitment that yes, 2030 goal we will fulfill, but now the government is saying 2030 goal we will fulfill by 2050 because we are a little behind than fulfilling actually the 2030 commitment. We are saying that we'll go carbon neutral. So there are many promises that are there on the table, but at the same time we have its own set of challenges that are there. Now these challenges are very interesting area for you and me to step in. How? Because this gives us a very interesting area for litigation. This gives very interesting area for us to research more. So for example, for all of us who are interested in climate suits and climate litigation, there's a whole center dedicated to it. It is called as the Sabin Center, SABIN, Sabin Center for Climate Change Action. So if you look at the center, it gives you a whole timetable of the cases, when and where climate change, cases were fought, what is the nature that is there, and what we are doing. Even in India, we have 7 cases. India total till now 7 cases, including 2 days before this Great Indian Bustard case, it will be 8 cases that have talked about climate change action. Now, when we talk about it and when we see it in the Indian parlance, only NLSIU, that is the National University in Bangalore, right? NLSIU, with a group of students, it tried or attempted to draft a climate change law. And it's very interesting. It's very much available. I don't know whether you people can access it or not. We were there at the workshop and we saw very brilliant student drafting how would a model climate change act look like. The biggest challenge was defining who is vulnerable community, right? Now we can say, women are vulnerable community. We can say fishermen community is vulnerable community. We can say people living in the coastal region are vulnerable community. But with the kind of earthquakes that are happening in north, especially in Delhi, in and around, we can say even people living in Delhi, etc., are from vulnerable community. So how do you define this vulnerable community is a very interesting question. Then the interesting question is, how do you define indigenous people, right? And indigenous people is very interesting issue. And why it is very interesting issue? If you look at the litigation that has happened in Chhattisgarh, it happened in Odisha. So there is a very interesting case. You must read about it. It has case filed against Vedanta. Now I know all of you might be knowing Vedanta is a very important very important MNC that is there. Then you have Sterlite Corporation. 2-3 very interesting cases are there where state-sponsored violence. They said to protect the industries. Even the state had, allowed few people got killed in the protest. It happened in Thoothukudi in Tamil Nadu. Sterlite Corporation was operating. People were health and it's creating a lot of environmental issue. They were protesting and the police opened fired, which actually killed a few protesters also. So Vedanta case is a very interesting case that you must look into. Sterlite Corporation is a very interesting case, and we have another very interesting case which I am personally very interested to see who will take forward. Especially people from Odisha and Chhattisgarh must be very well known with it. There is a hill or a mountain called as Dongri Kund. DONGRIKONDH. Now this Dongri Kund is a mountain area. It is rich in bauxite. But at the same time, the people living in and around Dongri Kund, what do they say? They say it is a god. The mountain is a god. The mountain sustains us. We believe religiously, spiritually in this mountain, and no industry ever should come and exploit and take away the bauxite, whatever it is there in this particular mountain. Again, rights of nature, very important. Let's see, tomorrow you might be the litigator fighting for, giving the mountain rights of nature that is there. Who knows? Someone from Odisha and Chhattisgarh might file a petition. Now, very interestingly, in this Dongri Kund, you see the idea of question. With Forest Dweller Act in the picture, recently there are many amendments happening in environmental law, and the government is also saying that let us create a single code for environmental law. Now, this is something which since I teach environmental law, is not a welcome step, definitely. Because environmental issues are diverse in its nature. They are not simplified. You cannot come up with a single code. One. Second, we don't even know what lies ahead. We are currently seeing globally climate change issues are happening. Parallelly, this right of nature issues are happening. So many things are happening that there's so much to research and talk about. But at the same time, consolidating them into a single unit, abolishing all earlier laws in the name of decolonization is somewhat, I don't believe, is a very progressive step. Yes, decolonization should appear from the mind, from the research, but decolonization does not. Yes, absolutely right, sir. Sacred forest in Meghalaya Northeast, Silent Valley protest, it happened. That is second wave of national environmentalism I'm talking about. Silent Valley protest. Look at that also. It's a very interesting protest. So if you look, all these issues are very interesting in its nature. Sadly, in all these cases, one thing you will find, India lacks good public international lawyers. Now, this is a very bold comment, and I'm commenting it, being a teacher of public international and environmental law, is because when we look at this worst environmental crime, I call it environmental crime, that happened on Indian soil was the Bhopal gas tragedy, right? I don't call it tragedy, I call it environmental crime. Why do I call it a crime? Because there's a lot of law and economics involved. Why there's a law and economics involved? It is simply not about gas leak and environmental problem. There's a lot of money involved. There's a lot of bad petition drafting involved. There's a lot of bad litigators involved, and that is why I say it's an environmental crime, and lack of public international lawyers and lack of good drafters that we had at that point in time. But I don't feel that's the same case now. We have more good budding lawyers that are coming into picture. Now, why do I say this? I say the beginning. Forum bargaining or forum shopping is a concept. Please find about it. It's a very interesting concept, forum shopping. It's usually in arbitration, mediation, or when you have a MNC parent company in Germany operating in India. Now it does something wrong in India. You say, where do I file a petition? In India, in Germany, or somewhere else, right? So you involve in something called as forum shopping. Forum shopping is not the regular shopping. It's like you come to a mutual consensus where will your petition be filed. So that is what we call the forum shopping. In the Bhopal gas tragedy, if you read the case law, this concept of forum shopping was very interestingly raised. A lot of people, Bhopal gas tragedy, Article 21, end of the story, people will not study it beyond it. No, it has a lot to do with law and economics. It has a lot to do with law of economics, right? So when you look at it, forum shopping concept comes into picture. Compensation, money. How do you quantify misery and pain is equal to in terms of money? What is the formula that you're applying? That is a very interesting thing. Also, when you're translating dollars into Indian rupees, how much did you claim? And the US at that point in time was like, yes, take it, close the case. I don't care, because your Indian rupee as compared to my US dollars is peanuts. Take it and just close the case. I don't care about it. And there's a Indian railwayman, very good Netflix series also on this Bhopal gas crime or Bhopal gas tragedy that is there. So it's a very interesting case if you look at it, and if you read bit by bit, you see that how law, economics, bad drafting, and petitions, annexures, evidences play a very important role. So interestingly, or sadly, I would rather say, the biggest issue with environmental jurisprudence and environmental cases today is most of the cases get involved in some sort of a immature argument and then they die. Similarly, right of nature was a very interesting opportunity for India. India could have done something which any other nation did not do, or maybe at least it would have taken inspiration from Australia and New Zealand. But where did we fight? Right to water, right to environment, river Ganga, religion, spirituality, end of the story. And the moment religion comes into picture, I don't know, we go mad, right? I am not again condemning the idea of religion, but sadly, the moment you bring religion, the main idea, that is protection, environment, etc., it gets diluted. And similarly, the same thing happened. We could have developed a very innovative jurisprudence at that point in time. The case is still pending before the Supreme Court. I have high hopes, and I am no one to comment on a matter which is sub judice, but I have high hopes. Let's see if the Supreme Court comes up with a very transformative, judgment whatsoever it is there. So interestingly, if you look at environmental litigations very currently, very interestingly, you will see that there is a lot of scope. Combine it with public international law and constitutional law as the basis, because 253, as I told you, Article 221, as I told you, DPSP, as I told you, fundamental duties, as I told you, all clubbed together and married together can bring up something very interesting. Now, let me give you a very interesting and a very quick example of a very recent case law. Now, a recent case law, please Google about it. It is called as KLM Dutch passenger aeroplane case, or airplane case, something like that. What is it called? KLM Dutch passenger airplane case. Now, what is this case about? This case says there is an airline. So, for example, we have Air India, Indigo, Vistara. Similarly, there was a Dutch airline, KLM Dutch airline, right? Passenger airlines, right? What did they do? They say that, whatever carbon emissions we are doing, we are, doing something under the CSR policy, corporate social responsibility, and we are trying to improve the environment. So end result is carbon neutral. We are not exploiting the environment, whatever. And it advertises. And all the advertisements, green airlines, green, everything was there. Finally, what happened, this case was, filed very interestingly before a regional court. The regional court look into it and it say you are doing nothing and there is a clear-cut case of you violating. And violating is one part of the story. You are passing misleading advertisement. You are doing something which we call it greenwashing. What is the concept called? The concept is called greenwashing, where you are liable for doing something wrong, but you paint it green and you say, oh, we are sustainable and there is no issue whatsoever. For example, that is the classic example that we see in India also today. You have 100 conferences happening on environment. People travel by flight. People travel by train. Carbon emissions happening. Reach there. Yes, environmental protection, etc. Yes, it should happen. And at the end, what is the end result? Does any of the conferences give in blue paper format or to even the state where it is conducting the conference? No, not at all. Even online conferences have their own carbon footprints. That is a sad story. So basically, our inherent nature is hypocrisy. That's what I'm trying to highlight also at the end of the day. So I'm a radical environmentalist, because I will be very blunt. If I something wrong, I say it on the face of it. So when you look at this, these cases gives what? These cases tells us sad stories. Sad stories in the name of CSR. People are greenwashing. Similarly, in India, all the conferences you see, plastic pen on top, you will find a bamboo colored paper, that is there. You remove the paper, there's a plastic pen, there's a plastic bottle that is there. Very sadly. And this is how, things start from your and my level at basic level. Now, this can start with as basic as, understanding the idea of, environmental law. And in fact, at the same time, preaching environmental constitutionalism. Now, why I say environmental constitutionalism, I wrote a very small piece for Bar and Bench few days before, where I said that even though the constitution does not talk about environmental protection, but the constitutional framer did. Now, who did? Dr. Ambedkar did. I don't know whether you people are aware, since we just celebrated Ambedkar Jayanti, that's why I'm bringing it forward here. Ambedkar said that, when I was a child, and this is a true story, he was a child, he was traveling from one village to another village. He was very thirsty. He wanted to drink water. And this is the story behind your 268 IPC also, right? So he wanted to drink water. He was very thirsty. He was traveling with his mother. They stopped at a place and they wanted to drink water from a public well. He was denied. He was very thirsty, and like that, almost on the verge of dying, he reached Morni someplace. Because of his caste, of course, access to water was, denied. And we still have the issue of caste for those people, and for those politicians who say caste does not exist. I feel sorry for you. I'm openly saying I feel sorry for you. Caste atrocities, yes, they do exist. I read it on a daily basis. I do read it. If I'm not reading it, the day I stop reading any caste atrocity news in the newspaper, I will believe that, caste system has been eliminated from India. But sadly, I am reading news every third, fourth day. So people who say that caste problem do not exist, I do not believe it, right? So now what happens is, he was denied water, and he said, as basic as water is being denied to me, that means, what kind of a society are we living in? And he started something called as Mahat Satyagrah. Now, Mahat Satyagrah, do read about it. It's a very powerful social movement. Now, why do I call it a powerful social movement? Because this movement did something. It brought about the idea of right to access to water. It said just because you belong to a particular caste category whatsoever, you cannot be denied water, as basic as water. 268 IPC is also formulation of this particular idea. It says, because at that point in time, this is one thing good Britishers did. They said obstructing water and, creating nuisance from to eliminate privatization of water, because privatization of water is the worst kind of a issue that we face today. Sometime long back, 10 years back, even the tap water we could drink. But now we all know there are water mafias. There are sand mafias. There are garbage mafias. So as basic as, you have kingpins of Mumbai. In Mumbai, people are earning thousands and thousands and crores of money because they're kingpins of garbage. So garbage mafia, sand mafia, and water mafia. That's what it is there. And it's truth. I'm not lying. You have sand mining cases in Gwalior, MP, that is there. Even in Alwar, Rajasthan, that is there. So these are classic cases, and you have NGT cases. Very interestingly, go to the NGT website, you will find the cases, right? Sumoto cognizance NGT has taken, because NGT has the power to take sumoto cognizance. Now, when you look at it, the Ambedkar, he talked about the Mahat Satyagrah, and Mahat Satyagrah did make a lot of sense. It talked about the access of water for the first time. It said just because you belong to a particular caste, you cannot be denied access to water. You cannot, coal mafia in Jharkhand. Absolutely right, sir. So this is what it was there. So in the Indian constitution, even though the word environment very perfectly has not appeared, yet the spirit of the constitution, yet the idea behind constitutional framers. So you had approximately, if I'm not wrong, 299, 196 members of the Constitutional Assembly. And if you go to Constitution, I don't know what is the website. It is called as Supreme Court Observer is one website which you must visit. It is called as Supreme Court Observer, sco.in. That is one website. The other one is constitutionofindia.net. These are two very interesting websites. If you look at it, you'll see what kind of interesting people actually represented different states. Bihar, we had the largest number of representatives from Bihar. We have largest number of representatives even from Madras for that matter. So very interesting, you'll see that what kind of a background people came and what labor was put in framing the constitution. So even if it's not mentioned, the spirit still talks about environmental protection per se. So that is what the idea as far as constitution environmental protection is considered. But sadly, with the international developments that are taking place and whatever is going around, and especially EIA 2020 notification, though, it is not officially a document, but the other way around, we've tried to implement it. So I won't comment on that. That is a separate topic altogether. But yes, environmental laws do, fall prey to all these politics very sadly. And there's a lot of scope that we can actually look into these cases and study in terms of research, in terms of sustainability, corporate social responsibility, etc. And there's a lot of litigation scope also per se when you practice in NGT, regional zonal benches, and even for that matter principal benches. So yes, the environment idea or environmental protection, though in letter it is not mentioned in constitution, but in spirit it does talk about the idea of environmental protection. So yeah, can we have questions? I like if we could have a few questions, comments, what you feel. Nandini, please, we'll go with Nandini first. Yes, ma'am.
Definitely. Ma'am, I believe that I'm also a law student and I have studied environmental law per se. So the laws like Water Act, Air Act, and different acts, they don't very specifically talk about things like IPC, CRPC. They're very specific about things. But these environmental laws are not very specific about anything. So why do you think is that the reason? Like there's no definite thing. They say as per the procedure or as specified. So I don't get the logic behind it.
Yeah, okay. So this is a very interesting thing. So when I completed my master's, my first job was I qualified the exam of a legal researcher. And I was research assistant to Justice A.K. Goyal, who recently retired as a chairperson of the NGT. That was my first paying job, because law, payment, internship is another issue again. It's a very heart-wrenching issue. I will not touch upon that. So that was my first paying job after master's. So we had this very interesting conversation. So Environmental Protection Act, you have 1986, you parallelly have environmental protection rules. So these rules, when read along with the act, they elucidate as to what procedure we must follow. But by and large, in India, not majorly environmental issues, if you read it, Water Act, Air Act, are not crimes. First thing we need to understand. Majorly, it's a civil wrong. And that is why exactly people are also talking about the concept of ecocide. So ecocide is also a very interesting burning topic happening internationally, where they're saying that recognize environmental protection and environmental degradation as an environmental crime rather than a civil wrong. So for example, you have Geneva Convention. Geneva Convention has recognized 3 sets of crimes that are there. Fourth, they are saying recognize environmental pollution as a crime. This is what they're saying. Why they are saying is, the moment if you will not treat it as a crime, people will continue doing what they have always been doing. And also at the same time, in terms of procedure, in terms of paying compensation, etc., we know the loopholes. We know how to, go ahead with whatever it is. And it has often happened with polluter pays principle also. Polluter pays principle has become polluter please pay principle. So polluter pays it and, he's free to do whatever he feels like. That is exactly what has happened. I don't know whether you're aware. I'm not very sure. But there was a camp near the Yamuna River. Shri Art of Living had put up a camp. This is a case in NGT. And if I'm not wrong, 500 crores fine was imposed upon him. Because after the camp of Art of Living, where we are seeking spirituality, major damage was done to the environment after that. Right? So it was a very difficult situation. But at the same time, NGT imposed a very high fine. Now, my question is, again, it's a very individualistic question. Where does the fine money go? You find, just Google on bar and bench, NGT fine, 2 keywords, 500 crore, 200 crore, 100 crore, 2000 crore. Namami Gange project, 2000 crores was sanctioned. Agreed. Is there any public report? I'm just saying, word of thought. I am not commenting. I'm just saying, word of thought. Where do all this, these money are going? That's a big question. I don't know. I'm not aware about it. Right? That's a big question that we have before us. That is one thing. Second thing is, apart from that, how do you calculate the compensation? Is there any formula? Like, how do you measure a misery of a person or environmental pollution? You apply some formula and then you say, oh, 500 crore is this. Now, for example, I'll give you a very interesting example. Again, word for thought. It's just for you to think. So we all know in Andaman and Nicobar, a very strong and a very ambitious project of laying down the cable lines and improving Indian tourism is happening. Lakshadweep Islands and Andaman and Nicobar is happening. Very interesting. Take out the news of 2-3 years before. The local community was protesting. Why? The moment you hear the protest, you will think, are anti-government. No, not necessary. They were protesting by saying that, indigenous right and we are the people here and you're cutting down trees. What are you doing for the environment? Blah, 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 all these things and all. So this is the biggest problem. Since it's a union territory, they can't really say much, right? Because the center has the power over it. But my question is different. I'm not talking about center. I'm not talking about union territory. I'm not talking about center-state relationship. I have only one question. All the trees that you cut down in Lakshadweep and Andaman and Nicobar, the law of the land says, what does Indian law says? Similar amount of trees you have to do afforestation. Compulsory forestation somewhere else. What does the government do? Government says, we are cutting down trees in Lakshadweep and Andaman Nicobar, we are planting in MP. MP is already green, my friend. No one needs trees there. Compulsory afforestation, we know. MP is already green. And doesn't make sense. Like, to me, it doesn't make sense. I don't know. For you, it might make sense. Just for the sake, 90% of the environmental policies are just policies for the sake of being policies. That's a very comical state of affairs that I see. I read news, I laugh, and at the same time, I feel sad. So, yeah. That's how it is. And people say environmental law and public international law, soft laws, they are non-implemented, highly violated. Make it a crime, my friend. Who's stopping you? The Bharatiya Nyaya Sanhita was one, could have been one big area where we could have actually made a few environmental issues crime. Why didn't you use that? You could have used that. It was a very good opportunity. Definitely. Why not? Problem is because then multinational companies and big issues, they will all be brought to the court of law, which they don't want. Now, as per recently, I was looking at very famous political parties' manifesto I was reading. They said ease of doing business and promoting arbitration mediation. Okay, I'm saying perfectly fine. Ease of doing business, you are going to loosen up. But what about the environmental issues? I agree that, this is, we will have good, doors will be open, more employment, agreed. But at what cost? And we are sitting at a very tipping point. Why I say tipping point? You people read the IPCC report, that is Intergovernmental Panel on Climate Change. Recent report that is there. It is very explicitly saying coastal regions of India will be submerged. Landslides will happen in north. There will this red coded area. That India belonged to that red coded area very sadly. But yet, and I'll go ahead with saying one more thing. I'm sorry to say, neither of the parties in their manifestos had zero accountability for environment. Zero accountability. I'm saying none of the parties in their manifestos. I was writing an article on this also. I was looking at the manifestos of past 10 years. None of the political parties have actually pointed out any party. I'm saying good, bad. I'm not going into that debate. But none of the parties actually talked about environmental issues. Rather, ease of doing business. I get it, ease of doing business, but at what cost? Again, that's the question. Yes, ma'am. There are a few more. Nandini, I'm sorry. Yes, Mohammad Ramiz Gulzari. Yes, sir. Then we'll have Ritik Raj and Amit Prakash. Yes.
Thank you so much, ma'am. Ma'am, first of all, a very warm good evening to you.
It is warm because
So
it's in Tamil Nadu and Chennai. Yes, please go ahead.
yeah, yes, ma'am. So I had this question of me that what action or steps do you think should be taken to ensure the protection of environmental rights?
Okay, what measures can be taken is what you are asking.
Yes, yes, ma'am.
Okay. Anything else? That's it?
Yes, ma'am. I had this question. Just a moment.
Okay, perfect. Okay, I think I'll take one or two more questions. I can club it with something else, then I'll answer because it's an interesting question, but let's see what others have to say. So there were two more people, if I'm not wrong. Ritik Raj. Yes, Ritik Raj, sir. Please tell me.
Ma'am, may I ask in Hindi?
Yeah, please go ahead. More than happy.
Okay, thank you, ma'am. Ma'am, the thing you have mentioned about global south and global north, ma'am, I have two questions. The first question is that जब हम वेस्ट की बात करते हैं, अगर हम हिस्ट्री और स्टेटिस्टिक्स को देखें, तो वेस्ट जो है वो कार्बन एमिशन का सबसे बड़ा सोर्स रहा है फ्रॉम द इंडस्ट्रियल रिवोल्यूशन टिल नाउ. इवन यूनाइटेड नेशंस के प्रयासों के बाद भी, इवन जो कलेक्टिव मीटिंग्स होती हैं G20 G7, उसमें भी ये हमने देखा है कि वेस्ट प्रॉपरली कंपनसेट करने को तैयार नहीं है. वेस्ट ने तो अपनी वेल्थ एक्यूमुलेट कर ली, इंडस्ट्रियल रेवोल्यूशन से वेस्ट ने अपनी वेल्थ एक्यूमुलेट कर ली, और उस वेल्थ को एक्यूमुलेट करने के बाद उसने अपनी मिलिट्री स्ट्रॉन्ग की, सॉफ्ट पावर उसने पूरी दुनिया में अपनी बढ़ाई. आज वो हमें अपनी आंखें दिखाता है. और जब हम सेम प्रोसेस करके वेल्थ एक्यूमुलेट कर रहे हैं, सॉफ्ट पावर जनरेट कर रहे हैं, तो उसमें वेस्ट कंपनसेट करने को तैयार नहीं है. वेस्ट का यही रोना है कि भाई कार्बन एमिशन बढ़ रहा है, कार्बन फुटप्रिंट को घटाना है. बट मैम द सैड रियलिटी इज दैट ना, अगर हम वेस्ट की लाइफस्टाइल देखें, जिस तरीके के लाइफस्टाइल वो जीते हैं, आज भी इंडियन से कई गुना ज्यादा वो लोग एनर्जी कंज्यूम करते हैं, बीट ऑफ फॉसिल फ्यूल्स, इलेक्ट्रिसिटी और एनी काइंड ऑफ लेवरेज लाइफस्टाइल जो वो लोग जीते हैं. पहला क्वेश्चन तो ये, तो वो अगर हमें कंपनसेट करने को तैयार नहीं है, हमारे छोटे छोटे डील्स होते हैं जर्मनी के साथ, जो कह देता है कि हम आपके यहाँ सोलर प्लांट लगाएंगे, फलाना ढमकाना, 10 20 30 100 मिलियन से कुछ नहीं होने वाला है. तो ये अगर प्रॉपरली कंपनसेट नहीं करना चाह रहे हैं, तो हम इतने लिबरली इंटरप्रेट करके अपनी जो डेवलपमेंट है उसको रोक के और ताक पे रख के ऐसा काम क्यों कर रहे हैं, जबकि हमारे पास पाकिस्तान, चाइना जैसे नेबर्स हैं जो आए दिन हमें धमकियां.
बिल्कुल, they cannot be trusted. True.
यस मैम, तो हम ऐसा क्यों कर रहे हैं? हम क्यों नहीं इससे भी साइड पर रख के अपने डेवलपमेंट को ध्यान दे रहे हैं? हमारे लिए ऐसा करना क्यों जरूरी है? हमें पता है कि सी लेवल राइज कर रहा है, मुंबई डूब जाएगा, गोवा डूब जाएगा, तमिलनाडु डूब जाएगा, बहुत सारे चीज डूब जाएंगी, बट एट द सेम टाइम हम ये अफोर्ड नहीं कर सकते हैं कि कल चाइना मिलिटरली इतना स्ट्रांग हो जाए कि कल अक्साई चीन के अलावा पूरा का पूरा लद्दाख ही ले ले हमसे. ऑल्दो वी आर अ न्यूक्लियर पावर स्टेट, but we know what happening in all the world currently right now. World order is completely distorted. यूनाइटेड नेशन की बिल्कुल वैल्यू खत्म हो गई है. हम बस यही जान रहे हैं कि जिसके पास मजबूत लाठी है वो कमजोर वाले को परेशान कर रहा है, बीट इजराइल, बीट रशिया, एनीवन. हम अपने डेवलपमेंट को क्यों रोक रहे हैं? हम अपने मिलिट्री को क्यों रोक रहे हैं?
Fair enough. You are saying that development, why should development come at the cost of, we bending down to the ideology of the West, where West is already equipped, having very strong military, everything is there, but at the same time, parallelly, why should we, compromise on our development standards when we have such susceptible neighbors around us, etc. I get your point, and I agree with you. I think largely more than 50% I agree on a lot of points with you, but I have my own take. Yes, Amit Prakash sir, you have something else to say, then we'll take this.
मैम, मेरा एक और क्वेश्चन था.
हाँ, जी बिल्कुल बताइए. सॉरी. यस
मैम, मेरा सेकंड क्वेश्चन ये है कि अगर हम सिविल सोसाइटीज़ की बात करें, आपने सिविल सोसाइटीज़ का मेंशन किया था, लाइक NGOs एंड अदर ऑर्गेनाइजेशंस, तो हम अब देखते हैं कि ये जो एरा है ना, ये 4th जनरेशन 5th जनरेशन वॉरफेयर का एरा है, जहाँ पे हम इंफॉर्मेशन वॉर में डील कर रहे हैं. ऑल्दो वॉर्स हो रही हैं, बट सबसे बड़ा वॉर है यहाँ पे इंफॉर्मेशन वॉर. एक गलत मिस इन्फॉर्मेशन फैल जाती है, रिलीजियस दंगे फिर जाएंगे. तो इस मिस इन्फॉर्मेशन के वॉर में जो सिविल सोसाइटीज हैं, अब कंट्रीज एक दूसरे से सामने के आपस में लड़ नहीं रही हैं, वो प्रॉक्सीज की तरह काम करती हैं और लड़ती हैं। वो फंडिंग देती हैं एनजीओज को, ताकि अगर कोई बॉर्डर एरिया पे मिलिट्री लेट से रोड बन रहा है, या फिर कोई मिलिट्री अपना बेस बना रहा है, या फिर हम कोई डेवलपमेंटल प्रोजेक्ट ही कर रहे हैं ताकि बॉर्डर के एरिया को अपने मेनलैंड इंडिया से कनेक्ट किया जा सके, उस केस में ये सिविल सोसाइटीज जो हैं वो उनके फंडिंग रिसीव, हम लोगों ने बहुत सारे प्रैक्टिकल केसेस भी देखे हैं कि कैसे सिविल सोसाइटीज ने बिल्कुल ऑर्गेनाइज तरीके से हमारी डेवलपमेंट को रोका है। तो हम ग्रीन चीज़ों के नाम पे सिविल सोसाइटीज को इतना फ्रीडम क्यों दे रहे हैं कि ये हमारे डेवलपमेंट को इस तरीके से रोक रहे हैं?
ठीक है, ठीक है, गेट दैट फेयर पॉइंट। ठीक है, गॉट योर सेकंड क्वेश्चन। अमित प्रकाश सर, प्लीज।
हेलो।
यस सर।
गुड इवनिंग मैम।
गुड इवनिंग सर।
हम बोल रहे थे, आपने एक पॉइंट्स उठाया कि कोई पॉलिटिकल पार्टी जो है क्यों नहीं अपनी मैनिफेस्टो में डालते हैं ये चीज़। तो जब मुंबई जैसे बड़े बड़े, चेन्नई जैसे सिटीज़ में जो वोटिंग पैटर्न है जो लोग दे रहे हैं, तो कहीं ना कहीं इसमें लोग भी जो है, जो पीपुल्स हैं, वो भी इसमें कहीं ना कहीं दोषी हैं, क्योंकि वो जो वोटिंग पैटर्न है उसमें कभी इन्वायरमेंट या वाटर,
पीपल आर वोटिंग ऑन द बेसिस ऑफ वन बिरयानी।
हाँ, तो वो कभी नहीं अच्छा। इवन हम कहते हैं कि मतलब जहाँ एजुकेशन नहीं है, लेकिन हम देख रहे हैं मुंबई जैसे शहर या कहीं भी, चेन्नई, दिल्ली, जो लोग एजुकेटेड हैं, जो पढ़े लिखे भी बहुत सारे हैं, इवन मतलब कोई भी कम्युनिटी ले लीजिए, चाहे लॉयर्स की कम्युनिटी, कोई भी, लेकिन बहुत ही कम लोग हैं जो कि उनका वोटिंग पैटर्न इन्वायरमेंट पे झुक रहा है कि हमको सही में क्लीन वाटर या हमको क्लीन इन्वायरमेंट या फ्रेश एयर चाहिए। तो वो भी कारण है कहीं ना कहीं कि वो उनको जो पॉलिटिशियन है वो इस चीज़ को अपने क्यों नहीं उसमें एजेंडा में क्यों नहीं ला रहे, तो उसमें कहीं वो ही नहीं दोषी है, हम लोग भी दोषी हैं। और दूसरी बात है, जो उन्होंने ऋतिक राज ने बहुत अच्छा पॉइंट उठाया है, वो मैं भी पूछना चाह रहा था, लेकिन उसमें है कि जो वेस्ट बार बार चिल्ला रहे हैं, तो सीओपी जो 2015 हुआ, अभी तक 100 बिलियन जो इन्होंने प्रॉमिस किया था वो इन्होंने
नहीं हुआ है,
अभी तक रिलीज नहीं किया।
बिल्कुल नहीं हुआ है। जी जी।
तो फिर ये लोग फिर जिस तरह से मतलब बोलते हैं कि नहीं बहुत इंडिया में पॉल्यूशन ये वो, तो जब हम अपना मतलब अब जो सबसे ज्यादा पॉल्यूशन किया वो अपना पे नहीं कर रहा है, तो फिर हम डेवलपिंग कंट्री को कैसे बोल सकते हैं? बिल्कुल, इतना बड़ा पॉपुलेशन जो स्टार्विंग है, उसको कैसे वो मतलब उसको कैसे इन्वायरमेंट वर्सेस डेवलपमेंट, जहाँ रोजगार कितनी कमी है, तो वो प्रॉब्लम तो होगा ही।
I think Kush Tanvani has a question, but let me just answer very quickly one or two questions here, and then we'll go back to Kush. Kush, just wait for a little bit more time. So, Mira, first, I have one question to everyone. When we say West, what do we mean? Who are we referring to? So, for example, if I'm saying West has done this. So, when I say West, what do we mean? Indira says USA. Anyone else?
USA, Canada, all the Nordic countries.
First option by default USA aata hai dimag mein. Yes, the first option that comes to your mind is USA. USA already is a failed economy. Let's start with this. Let's start with one by one. Now, when I say that, sir was saying global South and global North divide. Now, when I say global South and global North divide, I meant to say one very important thing here. As far as resources are considered, and I'm talking about natural resources, the kind of natural resources which African nations, Asian nations, very specifically SAARC region, South Asian region has. Of course, all these countries, like specifically if I'm talking about USA, does not have. And that is why US relies, let's say its economy relies on one thing. What is that one thing? Arms, ammunition. Unhidden truth, warfare. Whenever there will be a war, you will definitely find US's nose being poked into. Why? Because USA is the largest producer of arms and ammunition. What does it have of its own? Nothing. How does it contribute to its economy? Nothing. Major or the most important player in NATO, in UN, or whatever it is USA. Why? Because USA is the biggest exporter of arms and ammunition. Be it any chaos happening in Middle East, be it any chaos happening anywhere in the world, you will find USA interfering because USA has to sell it, aircrafts, drones, etc., send its arms and ammunition in the name of brotherhood. Yes, Israel, you are very good. My help. Who is asking for your help? If you really wanted peace, you would have done something else. One. We are not that. India does not have that legacy. We are never hate-loving people. We were never hate-loving people. We are not hate-loving people. We never will be. That is one thing. One thing also USA definitely has an hypocritic rule. One thing also we need to understand is we need to relocate our understanding of Western world. When I'm saying comparing to the West, I'm talking about an academician from environmental law. I never compare India with US. For me, US is no comparison at all. First of all, US does not have a culture of its own. Second, US is not even comparable to India in any sense. I'm being blunt here. Very honestly, I'm telling you. When I compare India with the West, I'm comparing it with Scandinavian nations. Now, if you look at all these very interesting data of international platforms that are there, they say Luxembourg is doing very good. Norway is doing good. Germany is doing good. Why? Green, it's very, Switzerland is very positive. Now, if you compare India with Germany, if you compare India with, let's say, Switzerland, now, of course, the basic thing people will start crying, ma'am, population is more, this is, I'm not going into that. There are various ways of managing that, and I'm not saying population control law is one way. You can control it by many other things. Population is definitely not a problem. That's a different issue that I'm talking about. But when I'm comparing with the West, I'm comparing with nations which, in terms of their GDP, stable economy, and in terms of being green, are doing well. Now, the biggest issue in terms of, when I say law and economics are interconnected with each other, it's a very interesting topic. Why interesting? Whenever we are seeing GDP, environment was never a component of it. And that is why US used to hit its chart. Now only from 10, 15 years, 20 years, people are saying include sustainability, include environmental protection. Even India came up with GGI index, good governance index. For the first time, we had something called good governance index because e-governance. We were talking about which state is doing good in terms of environment, right? For the first time, we started talking about it. So we need to understand the narrative first. Narrative is the biggest problem. The narrative here is when we compare it with the US is prepared. US not prepared for the war. Let me be very clear with you. And war is not the answer to all your problems. When I say US is not prepared for the war, it is because, I don't know whether you people follow news, there were military officers who contributed to NATO. They threw their medals and they said we were feeling shameful that we were a part of the war that took place in Afghanistan. I don't know how much you read about it or talk about it. This is how it is. Sadly, this is true. And very sadly, we see the Nuremberg trials, Tokyo trials, read about it. You will come to know what cost of war come with. Cost of war does not come with the present generation being exploited. It comes with the future generation being exploited to levels you can't even imagine. Yes, India is a nuclear state. Yes, Pakistan has its own ally, that is China. I agree with it completely. But when we talk about issues of environmental protection, our religious scripture, our culture, the very basic Indian, if you look at indigenous idea of Indian or Indian jurisprudence, Indic jurisprudence is not saying only Hindu ideas that existed in India. All the religions that existed in India always talked about one thing. What did it talk about? Safeguard of nature, immaterial. And I'm telling you, that's why I'm recommending, please read Ramchandra Guha's idea of 3 waves of environmentalism. Clearly says up until Britishers came, India was still doing better. Who made the Grand Trunk Road? Who talked about Chakbandi system? The contribution of Mauryan Empire, the contribution of Mughal Empire. You might deny, any party would say anything, but the contribution it had, all of them were sustainable in some sense. But when the Britishers came, they were a company. First, try to understand. They were not rulers. They were company. And company is made for profit making. And when it is made for profit making, they don't care about you. They will make laws which are in their favor. Employer-employee relationship. Gig economy we talk about. App-based worker. Who benefits? Not the person who's bringing Zomato food or you are eating the food. No. It's the app that is benefiting. Because social security code to kuch dena hi nahi hai na in log ko. If they meet an accident, then what happens, etc., etc. That's an issue. Anyways, now let's come back to what I was trying to discuss. Now the problem is, yes, ma'am.
Ma'am, sorry to interrupt you, but this meeting will end at 8:30 p.m. So
Yeah, I'll wind up. I'll take 5 more minutes. Don't worry.
okay.
I won't take a lot. I'm just, talking about it. Yeah. So this is the biggest problem. Now, when I come to India, And you have highlighted a very interesting point. COP26 took place, that is Conference of Parties. It took place in Egypt, Sheikh Al Shram, that's the place. I might be pronouncing it wrong. So very interestingly, in that conference, they said loss and damage fund will be established. What is loss and damage fund? It said that, for the first time, all the countries, that includes India also, came forward and said, you developed nations, you are saying we are developed, but your cost of development came at what? It came at the cost of polluting the developing nation. You threw all your things in or you dumped India, you dumped Africa, you dumped all the Asian and African nations. It came at the cost of our economy. It came at the cost of our development. So now you need to compensate us. Developed nations were reluctant first, but later on they said, okay, we will compensate you, no problem. But till now, no repository has been formed. No contribution of funding has been talked about, and how you will dispense the fund, that has also not been talked about. But very interestingly, there was a figure. That lady's name was Greta Thunberg, who came and talked about it. Similarly, we saw in India also a lot of things started happening. But I don't know whether you're aware about it. Similarly, there was an environmental activist in Bangalore. What happened to her? She is starting an environmental toolkit. That was the allegation against her. She was put behind the behind the bars that is there. So sadly, the biggest problem is environmental protection is seen something as anti-state. It is not. It's not necessary always. State combined together with environmental protection can do marvelous things. New Zealand is the biggest example. How is it the biggest example? Indigenous community are being given chances to secure their law, use their law for the benefit of the people. Faith-based organizations. Let's say if our religion, Hindu religion, Muslim religion talks about, safeguarding of environment. I don't know whether you people are aware. Canada has the largest, and even New Zealand and Australia has the largest faith-based organization. What are these organizations? They are based on religious faith and forms, whatever, but for environmental protection. Intertwining religion with environment and using it to how sustainability we can, live a sustainable life. Now, for example, I'll tell you, I don't know whether you people are aware or not. I teach in Chennai. So, and I did my master's also from Chennai. Tamil Nadu is very close to my heart, and I'm living here. And interestingly, I was born in UP. I had no say whatsoever in about working in Tamil Nadu. But I don't know whether you people are aware. Here in Hindu religion, they draw kolam. I don't know whether you people know about it. Kolam is kind of a white-colored rice powder. They make a rangoli out of it. I don't know whether you know about it, yes or no. But we all know rangoli. We make rangoli on Diwali. These people here in the morning, the first thing they do when they get up is make a kolam design. Your question is, how is it related to the first food that you give? You are welcoming God. You are giving to the tiniest creature, that is the ant. That's a culture. And nobody has filed a geographical indication case till now. But I think they should definitely do that, because it's very unique to Tamil Nadu. I have not seen it, in other places. So, for example, Chola Kingdom, if you see, all temples had some water reservoir naturally that is there. So our values, our culture system can never compete with the West, very specifically the US, because it was a discovered land. It did not have a history of its own. I'll be very frank and blunt about it. And we don't preach in the idea of obsessing with, national security at a stage where we are at a dooming point. I don't know whether your people are aware, Maldives is supposed to be submerged by 2026 or 2030. That it is at that critical point. Delhi never used to have earthquakes so frequently the way it is having now. What more proofs do you need that we are at a very difficult situation? The only proof that you would need is because Indian laws and policy believe on the idea of band-aid. When I get hurt, only then I will put a band-aid. Reactive lawmaking. Nirbhaya issue happened, protested, reactive band-aid policy, came up with a law, Criminal Law Amendment Act 2030. We still wait for something to happen wrong, and only then we come up with the law. So reactive, not proactive lawmaking. And sadly, environmental law has been a victim of this. So that is one point I would like to raise. Yes, as you rightly pointed out, both Ritik Raj and Amit Prakash, I agree with you that the West has been lazy. It has done nothing in terms of loss and damage. And that is why I said we need very good public international lawyers. And very interestingly, I'll tell you, We share a common vote at the Loss and Damage Fund and COP26 with whom? Just Google it. We share a single vote. 3 to 4 countries share a single vote while voting in the COP26. We share it with Middle East, Saudi Arabia, and that's why we have very good relationships with them. And that's why the current government maintains very good relationship with Middle East, because not only of natural resources, because of employment and because of the Indian diaspora working there. Indian community is very strong in Middle East, right? You have a very good, strong community in the Middle East that is there. Mutually, the workforce belongs to the Middle East. So we share a voting vote with them, and that is how good neighborhood policy works. Good neighborhood policy believes in the idea of diplomacy. And currently, what happened with Sri Lanka, what happened with Maldives, is very bad in taste. It shouldn't have happened. And at the same time, Maldives is regretting. It saw a backlash, or whatever it is there. But sadly, however, you hate the neighbor, love the neighbor, whatever it is. But good neighbor policy. I don't know whether you people have read about public international law. There is 2 doctrine in recognition of state. We call it Stimson Doctrine and Estrada Doctrine. Stimson Doctrine was given by the US. Estrada Doctrine was given by the Mexico official. He said good neighbor policy, and good neighbor policy is the only game changer that we have. You cannot make someone work on the name of law. You need to make sure that you have a good policy. Now, as far as India is considered, why are we compromising on our development? My friend, we are not compromising on our development. For all those who believe we are compromising, not at all. Just look at the environmental clearances. EIA 2020 notification. It said even if you don't have environmental clearances and you start an industry, after starting industry, retrospectively take a clearance. Is it a good law? It's not a good law. It was passed during COVID. People were not able to express their disagreement. It was not public consultation, was not done. Major industries, you see, people are public consultation is given zero importance. People are not translated in their language, vernacular language. This project is going to come up, it is going to make hell of your life. They are not able to express it because they're not communicated in their vernacular language. That's the power of language, that's the power of diversity. And these MNCs, they do this. They will just tell you, oh, we want 100 kg potato, same shape for lace. Now, I don't know, you get it from Haryana, you get it from Punjab. Sign a contract. I don't even know what the language is written. I'm a farmer, I don't know anything. I'm unable to deliver. I don't get compensated properly. That is why law comes into picture. That is why litigators come into picture. That is why strong drafting comes into picture. And if I tell you, India being environmentally sustainable, we were. Are we? That's a question. Because I see a lot of, violation of environmental laws happening even internally for that matter. Now, when I'm saying internally, I'm talking
Thank you for making this event. Thank
you
you.
about being considered, even your campuses that are considered, anything that for that matter you see. Are we compromising on the basis of national security? Not really, I would say. And comparing it with the West, USA per se, which is a flawed economy, doesn't make sense to me. Yeah, you compare it with a Scandinavian nation, we have a lot to learn. You compare it with Australia and New Zealand, lot to learn. Therefore, in fact, comparative law is a very good law. People don't teach it very nicely in law schools. Comparative law, the first question they ask, on what basis are you comparing two countries, India and Germany? Jurisdiction. In the basis of, same governance. We don't have basis. We're just comparing. We're obsessed with the idea of US. US has become the focal point of our discussion. I said it's the most disturbed people stay in US. Most disturbed. And Indian people, a lot of Indian people also stay in US. I'm not commenting on that. But most disturbed people, gun violence. You see the gun violence that is happening in US. India never had this. We are not of that culture. That's not a culture. Our culture, that's when you say arms and ammunition and nationalization in terms of that, yes, US is number one. Gun violence, yes. If that is the measure of your empowerment, sorry, my friend, I don't want India to be that. I never want India to be like USA. That's my conclusion, I would rather say. Yeah. In terms of environment also, it's US is the most, and then we'll...
मैम मैं एक छोटा सा बिल्कुल केस सिनेरियो ले रहा हूँ. जैसे मैं और आप नेबर्स हैं, तो आपने बहुत अच्छे प्लांट्स लगाए हैं. आप बिल्कुल अपने कल्चर और हेरिटेज के हिसाब से चल रहे हो. आपका कल्चर और हेरिटेज बिल्कुल ये सिखाता है कि आप एनवायरनमेंट की वैल्यू करो. बट एट द सेम टाइम मैंने अपने घर के गेट के पास ना लाइट मशीन गन बैठा रखी है, वहां मैंने 2-4 मिसाइलें बैठा रखी है कि मैडम आप आओगे ना तो मैं आपको मिसाइल से हिट करूंगा। मैं लाइट मशीन गन आपके तरफ पॉइंट करके रखता हूँ, सुबह दोपहर शाम आपका पूरा फैमिली देख के टेरराइज है कि भाई हमारा नेबर ऐसा है कि ये लाइट मशीन गन कभी भी फायर कर सकता है। इस केस में आपको भी अपने घर का पेड़ काट के वहां पे बंकर बनाना होगा। यहाँ मैम हम इन्वायरमेंट का कॉन्सेप्ट को थोड़ा मतलब ये रिलैक्स कर सकते हैं इस केस में।
I think you're comparing a lot with the situation of India with its neighbor. I think that's the comparison you're trying to make here. That since there's an apprehension that something might go wrong, therefore we should be prepared rather than thinking non-violent etc. We should be prepared
Yes, ma'am.
always. Yeah, I do agree. I never said don't be prepared. Everyone should be prepared. But now again, my question is, past 20 years. See the kind of has there been a raise in has there been a rise in the budget allocation as far as our arms and ammunition is considered? Just look at that. That would answer a lot of our questions. Budget allocation to military.
India has raised its military budget a very significant amount.
Yeah, so that's what I'm saying. What does it show?
It shows that India is more concerned about the internal and the external security. हम पेड़ काट के लाइट मशीन गन हम भी लगा रहे हैं और बंकर बना रहे हैं।
It's a very interesting debate, Ritik Raj. I would have loved to continue with it, but my idea of India is very different. My idea is reasonable care and caution, yes. Beyond that, it is obsession. That's, again, I might be wrong here. You might be right. I totally agree with whatever you say. And that's why we are India. We disagree to agree. But my idea is reasonable care, yes. Reasonable caution, yes. Obsession, something wrong. Something is definitely wrong here. That's my take. Yes, Utkarsh Sharma. Yes, sir. He was raising his hand from such a long period of time. Utkarsh Sharma, sir. Please speak.
इसमें मैं थोड़ा सा जोड़ना चाहूंगा स्पिरिचुअलिटी, क्योंकि सारी समस्या की जड़ इसीलिए होती है। आर यू लिसनिंग?
Yes, I am. I'm absolutely full ears. Yes, sir.
हाँ, क्योंकि ये भी डेवलपमेंट चाहिए, हमें बॉडी कंफर्ट चाहिए, इससे शुरू होती है। क्योंकि इंसान सोचता है कि स्पिरिचुअलिटी बेसिकली इससे आती है, जैसे वेदांत उपनिषद है, तो ये तो शुरू इससे होते हैं, क्या मैं एम आई ओनली द बॉडी। अगर आपके लोग देखेंगे जड़ भरत उपनिषद गंगा के ऊपर यूट्यूब पे, तो उसमें भी इसी से शुरू होता है कि इंसान मतलब बेसिक नेचर क्या है इंसान का, वो काम करना चाहिए।
लेकिन all these foreigners in Western countries come to India for peace and spirituality. You just look at Mathura, you look at all these very good religious places. People have devoted their life to Lord Krishna exactly because they are so fed up with their life. If they are so advanced, arms ammunition is the problem or solution to everything, then why India? I don't know. Then yeah, just look at the level of, and sadly, I'll tell you another sad fact. Maximum number of people who have given up their passport and citizenship in the world were Indians. Ulta ho raha hai. There's something very different happening here.
ये इंडिया का जो ये धर्म वगैरह है, ये सब बेसिकली इसी से शुरू होता है, वेदांत और उपनिषद से। लेकिन
सार बोलते हैं, सार ज्ञानाक्षु। I always start my class with the idea that there is a Gyanakshu or the third eye in the middle. And third eye, it's not about destruction alone. It's about knowledge also. It's about spirituality also. It's about welcoming other ideas. So I'll be very honest with you. It's the kind of spirituality that India teaches no one in the world can. Because it's a beautiful country with beautiful diversity. And I'm talking about beautiful diversity in the sense because I'm a Muslim, but I've read Hindu scriptures and Christian scriptures, and I'll tell you very honestly, the kind of, a peace you get, ultimately, we are all searching for it. And I'll tell you one very interesting thing. Since you brought this up, Utkarsh, you will be very happy to note, China has a very, Chinese study. It has established Center for Chinese Studies in Harvard, etc., everywhere. One country which has its own center of Indian studies, Melbourne University. You just look at the world. Center for Asian Studies, India pioneering it. You should be proud of it. Seriously, I'm telling you, Tamil is a recognized language, old Oxford level also. Which language is recognized from US? Just think about it. That's the whole game here. I'll take one more question very quickly and then I'll conclude.
इसमें मैं बस थोड़ी और इंफॉर्मेशन देना चाहूंगा एक दो लाइन की कि वेदांत उपनिषद के बारे में आपको आज की तारीख में जानना है, डिटेल में जानना है अच्छे से, तो 2-3 सोर्सेज मैं आपको बताना चाहूंगा। ये उपनिषद गंगा है नाम से, YouTube चैनल पे आप सर्च करेंगे तो मिल जाएगा। इस पे पूरा इस पे कई सारे एपिसोड बनाए उन्होंने, इजी लोगों को समझ में आए। लॉकडाउन में दूरदर्शन पे आता भी था ये।
अच्छा।
तो और इसको अगर आपको डिटेल में समझना है तो आज की तारीख में आचार्य प्रशांत है, वो इसको बहुत डिटेल में समझाते हैं वो लेसन में। हाँ, तो इसमें बेसिकली समझने की जरूरत है कि ओल्ड स्क्रिप्चर में लिखा क्या है, क्योंकि आजकल धर्म जाति के आधार पर ज्यादा
प्रेजेंटेशन अलग है। एक्चुअली सारे रिलीजियस स्क्रिप्चर्स के साथ सैडली ये हुआ है, यू पिक आउट 2 लाइंस, बी इट हिंदू स्क्रिप्चर, मुस्लिम स्क्रिप्चर, the whole country starts burning. No one wants to know the context के आगे क्या बोल रहा था, पीछे क्या बोल रहा था, इसका मतलब क्या है. So sadly, that's also part of another interpretation. We'll not go into that. Kush Tanwani has been raising his hand from so long. I'll just take his last question because poor guy, I promised him to give him a chance and I did not. Yes, sir. Please tell me. Yes, Kush, sir.
Yeah. Thanks, Nabeela, and thank you for convening the session late on Monday evening. So I'm currently doing my master's in human rights law in University of Nottingham, and I'm researching on environmental democracy. So certain parts of your session today talks about actually touched upon different instances where there have been community protests, right? So you were mentioning about the second wave and the third wave where the community participation has come up. So my question is 2-part, right? So the first part, where do we actually see the right to protest in context of what we are talking about, environmental law and constitution, right? So because I was working with Center for Policy Research when the EIA 2020 draft came in, and as you rightly mentioned, it was under COVID lockdown, and I firsthand saw like the kind of protests that were happening and like the state pressure of using terrorist laws against civil society organizations. It was absolutely horrific and terrifying in nature. So where does the right to protest come into picture when we're talking about the context of environmental law and constitutional law? And the second part of my question is state obligations, right? When we're talking about instances like Vedanta and Sterlite, where there have been state oppressions, allegedly state oppressions. So where do we actually understand state obligations as far as the constitutional obligations goes, and as far as the obligations under international law go? Because right, you mentioned about Article 253. Whenever India signs a treaty, it needs to bring in a municipal law as furtherance to that particular part. So what are your thoughts on these two parts of the question?
Okay, if I understood the question right, because there was if I understood the question right, you are trying to ask us that, ask me very specifically that where do we draw a line when it comes to people protesting and an environmental movement wave occurring at the same time? Is protest a modus operandi for reaching that particular goal, or rather sometimes it's also a misled tool? I get it.
Yeah. Also, like as far as it becomes important to raise your voice, right? When you're talking about indigenous communities, and you gave examples about Lakshadweep and Andaman, people have right to raise their voices and have right to protest peacefully. I'm trying to understand this right in the context of the discussion that we had today, right? Environmental law and constitution. So just understanding your views of like, how do you see this right to peacefully protest in the context of our discussion today?
Okay, so right to peaceful protest, again, it's a very interesting idea. Usually when we see right to protest or right to dissent, it has usually been aligned with labor laws. Majorly, if you see, maximum of the discussion comes up when employment and employer issue comes up, and majorly the discussion of protest has come into the idea of unionism, the idea of trade unions being there, labor laws or labor law discussions have been there. Now, when I'm talking about the three waves of environmentalism, and I talked about the idea of what Ramchandra Guha was trying to say, and especially in the second wave of environmentalism, if you look at the major movements that has happened in India and even in the worldwide, very specifically, or even in Asia for that matter, every movement, the core was the idea of dissent against the state. This was common in all the movements. This even included the cotton belt in Maharashtra. I don't know whether you people are aware. So Vidarbha. Vidarbha is the most water-drenched area in Maharashtra, where water became a very big issue, and cotton cultivation, indigo cultivation was a very big issue at that point in time. And closely nearby Vidarbha, we had Mumbai, where fashion shows were taking place, plenty of water. People were giving charity to save Vidarbha, where farmers were committing suicide in Vidarbha at the same time, parallelly, right? Now, the issue here that we see very interestingly, and there's a very good book, if I highly recommend this book. This book is called Everyone Loves a Good Drought. It is written by P. Sainath. The name of the book is Everyone Loves a Good Drought. Drought is a condition whereby you are drenched on water. You don't have water at all. So it was written by P. Sainath, and he has delivered a wonderful lecture. So in that wonderful lecture, what does he say? He said that there is a very interesting historian. Historian's name is Tacitus. He's a Greek historian. Now, this Tacitus historian, what he does is he writes an analog. And that analog, what does he do? He says that there are rich people, elite people of the society. They are invited by a king. And that king invites these people to a garden in the evening time, stating that there's a party for you. In that party, these people are invited and these people are eating. But there's a problem. There is no electricity in those times. Now, how does he lights up the garden? He says, let us bring the prisoners. Anyhow, prisoners are going to die. He ties the prisoners to a pole and light them up. There's light in the garden. Everyone, rich people, elite people, people in the name of environmental protection are eating, enjoying the party hosted by the king. Whereas the light is provided by the burning prisoners on the pole tied together. This is account of a historian called Tacitus. It is very much given in the one of the lectures of P. Sainath. It is a very painful description. What does it mean? This means sometimes we are the witnesses of things happening wrong around us. But it's just that we are very accustomed or very in tune with the idea, and we never put in a word for whatever it is. Now, the biggest issue as far as your protest and the idea of protest is, when you look at the environmental issues worldwide, one thing in common, even I was seeing for that matter, and the maximum killing of environmental protesters and people who brought environmental scams or issues forward has happened in has happened in Brazil, and South America. So these are the places where it happens a lot. But parallelly, that is not the condition in Asia in that sense. But the voices are made to silent. Now, when I say voices are made to silent, I say it because when you see at the nature of environmental movements that are there, majorly all these environmental movements usually start with protests, and that is why women are made the forefront, or the young people are made at the forefront of these protests. Let's take example of Sonam Wangchuk's protest that is happening in Ladakh. He said, now after me fasting, the youth will take over and the women will take over, etc., so on and so forth. Reason is more stakeholder, silent protest, silent, idea. Sometimes to translate or to tell people, protest becomes very important. Now, protest becomes violent when the state is reluctant to hear. Now, when is the state reluctant to hear? When the state is reluctant to modify any of its policy that is there. This was very much evident in the Sterlite protest that took place. But similarly, we have a success story of protest. Lakshimada is a success story of protest. Lakshimada is a small village in Kerala where people silently protested against a Coca-Cola plant that was established in Lakshimada district of Kerala. And people said, the water that you're taking away from this village, you are polluting the groundwater table. We completely do not agree with it. And they protested. The positive point, no violence, women, the 444 flag bearers of the protest, and the Coca-Cola company, what was supposed to be shut down. Sad story. Sad story is, if you look at story of Buxar, if you look at story of Chhattisgarh, if you look story in Odisha, if you look at the story of Dongri Kund, majorly what happens is these indigenous people, they resort to taking violence and they start combating, or that protest becomes coupled with arms and ammunition, and of course it transits the boundary of dissent. No longer it's a dissent, then it becomes violent dissatisfaction with the state policy because you're resorting to violence. Now, how does it shape and how does it churns or cultures everything? 90% of the time, these non-violent protests have actually led to the formulation of good laws that were there. For that matter, Aravali range that is there. People protested and that was a success story. Again, a lot of development projects were stopped. Array Forest in Maharashtra, for that matter. People protested, and for the first time we saw the then government of Maharashtra, it took Array Forest project very seriously. And it said that watershed, that shed, whatever we are trying to make here, that will be, relocated, and we cannot, use this particular area. But now the problem is there's a thin line. Now, what is a thin line? Between civil disobedience and resorting to violence to make the state understand. Now, this is exactly where, peace building, or let's say confidence building exercises between the state and the civil society and the people comes into picture. This is exactly where faith-based organizations can actually fill up the gap, which is unfortunately not happening in India. But if you look at US and other models, they have been very successful in doing so. With the current crackdown on civil societies, because Ritik Raj said that, categorically, if we see a lot of, civil society NGOs are targeting, whatever it is there. But I see that, might be true for a lot of civil societies, but at the same time, not all I find that, they are strategically doing something against the government by and large. And a lot of civil societies have done good also at the same time. So, for example, let me take example for that matter, a lot of associations and organizations that are there which have actually helped in the communication of ideas of environment. Now, if you couple it up with religion, it can be a master stroke. It can actually work in your favor, but that depends on how you translate it. But yes, environmental movements, if you see it from the second phase of environmentalism, from the perspective of Ramchandra Guha and how he describes it, I can very well say that yes, protest and environmental movements with women at the focal point and the youth has actually created, or was one of the reasons why environmental jurisprudence established or developed in India. Yes, I'm very sorry. You can take over. National Legal Rights Consortium, NLRC. Yes, I'm really sorry. I think I've exceeded my time. I apologize for being very liberal with the time. Yeah, you people have been messaging also. Yeah,
It's totally fine. Actually, it's just that the link is about to expire again now. So that's why
I get it. I'm very sorry. I would really love to, have a very good future conversation again, perhaps on some topics that you might be saying. And I'm really sorry. Kush, can you please email me? I would love to have this discussion over an email if possible. It would be very interesting. I have few very good readings I would love to share also.
Actually, we have shared the feedback form where people can post their questions and we'll forward those questions to you. You can answer them there also.
Perfect.
So yeah, finally, on behalf of Team NLRC, we would like to extend our heartfelt gratitude to you, ma'am, for your time, effort, and such profound insight. I'm sure we all agree that we all got to learn a lot from you today. So thank you for this amazing session. And I would also like to thank each and every participant today for staying encouraging, actively engaging in today's session. This proved to be a very fruitful session for all of us. Thank you for making this event a huge success. And once again, thanks a lot, ma'am. And we eagerly anticipate to, collaborate and host you again in the future.
Absolutely. And NLRC, thank you so much for inviting me. And apologies if I've offended anyone, because few things, you see, the thing is, few things you have to be a little personal and opinionated. So, I might have been opinionated in a few things, But apologies for, if I had transgressed that boundary. But I really help in provoking minds to think. It could turn, anyways, you could think about it in any manner it is possible. Thank you so much. I think I close the link there. Thank you so much, everyone. Thank you.
Thank
Have
you,
a great
ma'am. Thank you so
Thank you.
much. Whosoever has not filled their feedback forms can do so now.